Is paying attention to the physical sensations we feel in our body a bad or a harmful thing within our Qigong practice? That's going to be the topic of this episode of Qi Life. Okay, if you've been following the channel recently, at least, you'll know that this is actually part of a series of videos. I've made one previous to this, which was about the general topic of is too much of something being bad mean that that thing is inherently bad, and talked about a few examples in there. So you might want to actually go back and check out that vlog. Maybe watch this one first if you like, and then go back to that one for some broader context. I'll put a link to that in the description below. And there's going to be another one in this series on another aspect of Qigong practice of, if too much of that is bad, does that make that thing bad? Now, my inspiration for talking about this topic was I did recently see someone essentially saying, in so many words, that paying attention to the sensations we experience during our Qigong practice is a bad thing, and that somehow this is going to do us harm or prevent us from, finding the true essence within our practice, or, whatever the overall point was. And you can take a charitable interpretation of maybe what that person was trying to say, and I'll do that first. I'll talk a little bit about how, in a sense, that can be true, but it's not an absolute truth at all. It's actually, in many other ways, really healthy, really important to pay attention to our sensation within our Qigong practice. So I'll talk about both sides of this topic, and hopefully, I guess my main aim here is Qigong being quite a subtle, quite a nuanced type of practice, working with things that many people, at least to begin with, are unfamiliar with. I think it's very easy for people to, naturally want to, take in information and learn things about the practice and, hear what different people have to say, naturally, of course. But because they don't have a lot of experience, and maybe because it's something unfamiliar to them, they don't have a solid framework of understanding around that to begin with, very easily for them to take what some people say maybe too literally, and for that to misdirect them. And so it's actually something in a lot of the vlogs, and this is not necessarily what I want this channel to all be about, but and to be fair, I do talk about other things sometimes, but I do seem to spend a lot of time sort of trying to clear up misconceptions that people might have about aspects of Qigong, because I do think that Qigong is such a beautiful, beneficial practice when done in a healthy, balanced way, that I really don't like to see people getting the wrong idea about the practice and being, misguided off in the wrong direction, and not getting as much benefit, or missing out on some of the benefit that they could get from this beautiful and, at its base, simple, hugely beneficial type of practice. So, how can paying too much attention to the sensation in your body be harmful in Qigong practice? I think what this ties into is something that I have actually talked about before in some of the vlogs on this channel, which is where people start to become fixated on the sensations that they experience, or fixated isn't necessarily always the word, but maybe put too great an emphasis on particular sensations that they've felt or experienced, and then that starts to shape what they're looking for and what they're aiming to do in their Qigong practice. And essentially they start chasing these sensations, trying to pursue them. And that can be either trying to recreate a sensation that they've experienced at some point, or to create a sensation that they haven't experienced, but maybe they've heard about and they think that would be a good thing, and so they go chasing after that. And that can certainly be unhealthy for a couple of reasons, probably more than a couple. But one being, many of the sensations that we experience during our Qigong practice, in terms of the healthy flow of us naturally progressing within that practice, are transitory. They actually come because we're at a certain stage of having our energy flow become stronger and perhaps open up. And it's because we're at that stage that we experience a certain sensation. Once we pass through that stage, it goes away. And so to actually go seeking that sensation means getting ourselves stuck at a certain phase of our practice. So a little example of this, or an example connected to a pretty accurate analogy. One sensation we can feel quite commonly within our Qigong practice is heat. And sometimes we feel it in specific locations in our body, sometimes we feel it circulating in different ways, sometimes we can be aware of it being emitted from our body, and so on. Is it a bad thing to be aware of that heat? No, of course it's not. I'm going to come back to why it's a good thing to be aware of sensation later. I'll stick with why it can be a bad thing for now. So, why do we generate heat? Sometimes as part of our practice, or why might we experience heat? One aspect of this is simply, as energy is passing through our body, if it passes through freely, it doesn't encounter resistance, and we won't experience as much heat. It'll just flow through, and because it's not kind of encountering, and you can think of it as like rubbing up against stuff, rubbing up against how narrow the channels are, we won't experience so much. It just flows through. It doesn't really do much. But when we do have some restriction in the flow of energy, that's when we'll experience heat. Now, the analogy that is pretty accurate is of electricity passing through a wire. Now, if you have a big fat wire conducts electricity really easily, you run some electricity through it, that wire is not going to heat up, well, unless it's a huge amount of electricity. For a small amount of electricity, that wire is not going to heat up in any appreciable way. Electricity is just going to go straight through it because there's very little resistance. On the other hand, the narrower that wire gets, the thinner in diameter that wire gets, the more that wire will heat up for the same amount of electricity passing through it. And that's because it's a narrower conduit, and so there's more resistance. It's harder to get that electricity to flow through, and essentially it's rubbing up against things, electrons are banging into each other and to other atoms and so on, and it generates heat. And we use this in useful ways. Like it's not so common anymore, but old-fashioned electric heaters. You'd have a reasonably thin wire, and it could be in a like a sort of zigzag pattern, or it could be rolled in a coil around something, and you run electricity through it. The wire gets so hot that it normally starts to glow red or orange, and that heat radiates out, and you're using it to heat up your space. Another even more extreme example than that is the old incandescent light bulbs. Now again, we don't use these so much anymore these days either, using LEDs and stuff like that. But those old incandescent light bulbs, the way that they work is they get an extremely thin filament, so it's super, super thin, run that electricity through that, and it heats up so much that it glows white. And you don't just use it as a source of heat, although those old incandescent light bulbs did generate heat. You also use it as a source of light. And the reason why that's coming out so strongly is because of the resistance, because the electricity is having a hard time getting through. And so the same in our body. When we have more energy running through than maybe we did previously, we will tend to experience heat. So in some ways, experiencing that heat is a positive sign often of progress. Like, yeah, you've got some energy flowing through, great. The flip side of that is it's also a sign of you're at the level that amount of energy is causing heat. As things open up further, that same amount of energy flowing through won't cause heat anymore. And so you don't want to limit your flow to just creating that heat. Now, there are times when you might consciously do that as you get more skilled with your energy, because you're specifically wanting to generate heat. So you're introducing resistance to your energy flow in order to generate heat. That's another level beyond. But just purely in terms of getting that energy to flow, to constantly be seeking out creation of heat is not helpful particularly. It's actually holding you back from opening the flow more fully, more strongly. And that can go for other sensations that we may experience as well. Things like, perception of light, that being one of them. Sensations of vibration, sensations of magnetism, all sorts of different things. Even imagery that sometimes will come up as part of Qigong practice, within your mind's eye. All of these things can occur quite naturally as things are shifting, changing, opening, energies flowing through, energies being released. But the nature of them is that once things get released fully, or once things open more fully, they then go away again as well. So you actually hold yourself back by constantly seeking those out. Another aspect of this is in seeking out a particular sensation. And again, it might be one you've never experienced before, or it might be one that you really have experienced and you're trying to make it more intense. You can actually then force your energy to flow or to function in a way that's unhealthy for you, because you have the wrong idea in your mind about what would be a good thing to have happen, and pursuing that too intensely, then our mind has a real effect on what happens to our energy, and having that intent can then cause things to actually flow not just in a healthy way, but a way that's unhealthy to us, and we can potentially do ourselves a lot of harm. And so that's how it can be harmful. It's so tempting to talk about the harmful, the good, and then the balanced all at the same time. But I think it's going to be better now if I talk about the good and then I talk about a balanced perspective. So moving on to how paying attention to the sensation of our body can be a really good thing in our Qigong practice, and I'd say even an important thing. Well, how do we actually understand what's going on in the world around us, or even within our, not necessarily around us, like that car going past, but, within us, within our lived reality? It's through our senses. Like, plain and simply, it's through our senses, whichever senses those might be, whether it's touch, taste, smell, sound, sight. It's through our senses. This connects us to our living reality, our now. If our practice becomes too detached from that, purely into some kind of hypothetical that's not connected to our real sense, we can easily become detached from reality. And that can have effects on, different levels of potential harm. I mean, at the extreme, it can lead us into just complete delusion, where we become completely detached from reality. At a much lower level, we might just put a lot of effort into something that's not really doing anything for us. It's not, it's just an imaginary fantasy world, and, at the bare minimum, we're wasting our time, although it may not create too much harm beyond that. So there's a real spectrum of harm that can come from actually not connecting what we're doing to, easiest to demonstrate touch, on a video, not connected to our senses, to what's really going on. So in many ways, paying attention to the sensations in your body at a super simple level can be just about staying connected to your physical lived reality, and that keeps your practice grounded in reality, and that is such an important thing. Beyond that, paying attention to your senses starts you to become, you can observe when things change within your body, within your energy. That's healthy too, both in terms of noticing good things happening and like, oh, that seems to be something positive, and also noticing when maybe something, because this can happen, maybe something not so good happens within your body, within your energy. Your senses can connect you and help you to notice that. And paying attention to those can help you to notice that sooner, so that you don't allow it to get worse, to get too far out of balance. And if you notice these things soon enough, you can generally correct them quickly as well. Again, as I've said many times in different vlogs, Qigong overall, for most people, is an incredibly safe practice. The chance of harm for most people is low. Where harm does occur, it's generally when they are pursuing something too strongly. They get a bit fixated on it, a bit obsessed, and they don't pay attention in a just common sense way. Notice what's going on and go, oh, that's not so good, I better change that. That's when harm tends to occur. But for most people, it's incredibly safe. So just because I'm saying harm can occur, don't worry. For most people, that this is very likely for you. It's if you do things like stop paying attention to the sense of your body, that might be where you can run into some serious harm. Or when you chase after sensations too strongly, and so on. So yeah, positive side, connecting to your body, noticing things change, noticing things happen. Then another step beyond that, again, as energy flows through our body, through our energy system, not all of our energy system is literally physically within our body. Some of it can occur outside the body as well. It's all connected. Noticing and becoming familiar with some of those sensations, you start to learn and be able to recognize more clearly different aspects of how the energy flows and patterns within that flow, patterns within the character of the energy, which helps you to understand it better as a starting point, and then also can help you to develop skill with that energy. And that skill can be just in terms of how you live your own life and keep yourself in balance and harmony, but it can also then go into other things like using that energy for, one good application is using it in healing. Knowing what flowing energy feels like, and it's not just feeling, again, feeling's the easiest one to talk about often, it's other senses as well. The sense of those energy flows then is an important contributing part to developing that skill, and you can use that energy flow in a very real, very healthy way to help other people. Fantastic. You can apply it to other things as well, probably the most common one being martial arts. That can be very interesting. You can apply it to other things as well. You can apply it to art. You can apply it to understanding the energy in the space of your home and how your energy responds to different things and so on. Paying attention to those sensations. Again, this is keeping you grounded to the physical reality of your experience. It helps you to develop the skill, develop this nuance, develop this awareness, and to keep that grounded in reality rather than off in just the land of theory or make-believe. You're actually connecting to something real, and that is, so important for getting true value from your practice and making sure you're doing something real, that you're steering yourself through your practice, through your life in the healthiest, best way. All right, so we've got the potentially bad, we've got the potentially good. Between those, we find a balance. We aim to stay in the area of the good, paying attention to our sensation, but not fixating on it, not chasing after a sensation, using a lot of observation, observing what's happening, and then noticing and using some wisdom, some judgment to understand that a lot of what we sense and what we feel, what we experience will be transitory. It will pass through, and that some aspects are more persistent, and we can then start to learn to guide different aspects of that in healthy ways. All right, I've probably, I think, covered that topic in enough detail for now, although I'm sure that there's many different little aspects of that could talk about more. But I really hope that this is helpful for someone, maybe even several people, and how you approach your Qigong practice, that you recognize the value of paying attention to your sensations, but you do that in a really healthy way that helps you to get the most out of your practice. All right, if you've enjoyed the vlog, please like, comment, subscribe, share, all those good things. I look forward to seeing you on another one soon.